Hello, and welcome to Healing Trauma Mamas. I'm your host, Madon Wingo. Thank you for joining us as we share in our stories and experiences of healing from childhood traumas and birth traumas. Listen as we discuss our struggles, our failures, our strengths, and our victories, and all those lessons we've learned along the way. Welcome to the Healing Trauma Mamas podcast. Today, I have a special guest. Haylee is joining us. She actually is from Texas, and I'm so thankful she got to come on the podcast with us today. Haylee, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Haylee Graham, and like you said, I live here in Texas. And I guess mainly what we're going to be talking about is the birth of my second child, Ben. And I'm really excited because it was my first natural birth. And I'm just kind of excited to share his story and everything that we went through and how God just really worked in his life. So my first child, Abby, I had when I was in my early 20s. And so that's been almost 10 years ago. And so I would say my pregnancy with her was pretty uneventful, whereas with Ben, I probably had more struggles, nothing really traumatic. I did have a lot of trouble with my pelvis in that third trimester. He just wanted to camp out on my right side, and he kept trying to rotate my pelvis, which made it pretty painful. But by the time we got to the actual birth, everything went really well. And with my daughter, Abby, I'd had her in the hospital, and it was not a good experience at all. And so sort of my approach when it came to natural birth, I almost thought, well, anything can be better than what I had in
Oh,
the
man.
hospital.
Yeah, sometimes for
And
sure.
yeah,
What
and
type
it
of
was
trouble did you have in the hospital, if you don't mind me asking?
so I think one of the main things is I went in sort of blind. I had no idea that you can actually have a voice with your
Mm,
childbirth.
mhm.
Even in the hospital, you can say, no, I don't want this, or I do want this, and so I allowed myself to sort of be bullied around. Um, I went in there. I had decided long ago that I didn't want an epidural, and the nurses kept trying to force me to get one. It was very strange, which I don't even think legally they were supposed to do because you have to like watch a video and sign some paperwork and things like
Correct.
that.
Yeah.
But they kept saying, don't you want an epidural? Don't you want an epidural? We can wheel a TV in here for you. It was crazy. And so there was that frustration. They wouldn't let me get up and go to the bathroom. The nurse would say, no, you can't go to the bathroom. You might have your baby in the toilet. Um, just all kinds of stuff like
Wow.
that.
Yeah, yeah, they generally
There
don't come that
was
fast, especially
no,
first time
no.
mamas.
Yeah, that I was in labor by the time I got to the hospital until the time I had her. I was in labor for 13 hours. And there was points where I just wanted to turn the lights off and rest. But, they have you hooked up to all the monitors and things in the
Mm-hmm.
hospital. And so every time I'd have a contraction, everyone would rush in, they'd flip on all the lights, where it just made it almost impossible to rest. They were checking me every hour, which was really painful. Um, I mean, that's
Oh,
not a
yeah,
pleasant thing to have to be
for
checked.
sure.
Um, and so the whole thing was just a mess, and then of course, I had her in the bed. I think I had a second degree tear. It was just a mess. I mean,
Oh, I'm
I still
sorry.
had a relatively unmedicated natural birth, but it was just so frustrating. And even as they wheeled me out of labor and delivery, a nurse said to me, "Now, don't you wish you'd had that epidural?"
Oh, that
And
stinks.
I said, "No, it's over.
Yeah,
I don't wish I
goodness.
had gone back."
Oh,
So so when I, decided to have a natural birth, it was just a completely different experience.
so you
Obviously the
decided
love,
to go a different route this time and just forego the hospital completely?
yes. And it sort of ironically, one of the main drivers was COVID was
Hmm.
because COVID restrictions were so severe. And I wanted to be able to have who I wanted at my
For
birth. I
sure.
wanted my husband, I wanted my daughter, I wanted my mom, and any other family members that I wanted to, if they wanted to come and see the baby as soon as it was born.
Hmm.
I wanted all that freedom. And I thought, I already had an unmedicated birth in the hospital. Why don't I just go all the way? Why don't I just have a full on natural birth,
There you go.
And so, and, and I was really, happy with it. I was excited about the idea of a water birth,
Hmm.
as a means of sort of pain management, to take the hot bath and everything like that, which is what seems like most moms want to do when they get in there.
It's very comforting. It helps a lot. It helps bring down, you kind of get to a certain point when you're out of the water of just like, this is a lot. And then when you finally get in that water, it just feels so much better. You get some relief.
Yeah. Yeah, it was great. And then, by the time I got to the birthing center, to the time I had him, I think I was only in labor 5 hours.
Yeah,
Um,
you did
so
amazing. I
so
guess
but
we
yeah,
should clarify for the listeners that I was there
right. You were there.
because
So
we're
you
kind of
know.
talking about that. Yes, I did get to help with that as a student, so I'm very thankful for that. But probably, you had no complications. There was nothing,
No.
and everything had come out fine. All your scans, all your blood work, your GBS, everything was great. Like we didn't have
Yeah,
any
all my tests look
concerns.
good.
Yeah, everything was wonderful. And it was a beautiful birth, and he did amazing afterwards.
Yeah, he was healthy. There was no problems whatsoever. And so I went to bed and I had a bassinet right beside me in the bed and I swaddled him and put him in the bassinet. So he was supposed to sleep 4 to 6 hours and it just wasn't happening. He was just unsettled pretty much as soon as we got home, or I would say within the first couple hours. And my mom was staying with us to help out. Um, and she was telling me, something's just not right with him. I can't put my finger on it. I think he's breathing funny. Um, so we got in contact with my midwife, um, kind of communicated my concerns to her. She had me take a video to see if he had I still can't remember what you called it, with the chest, the retractions, right? Chest
Hmm.
retractions.
Hmm.
Um, and she didn't think it was. And so she told me to send James to the store to get some formula because he hadn't been nursing.
Hmm.
And so he did that and came back and he still was not really eating. He would take like a couple swigs of the formula and was just kind of genuinely unhappy. Um, and I mean, I guess just to make a long story short there, just kind of as the hours went on, he just kind of got worse. So he was just not really eating. He was just unhappy. He was crying a lot.
Hmm.
Um, and my mom just kept saying, she's like, something is not right. She had the instinct. She had all the mom instincts. She's like, something is just not right with him. This just doesn't seem normal. And I thought, well, sometimes babies just cry,
They
you hear
do.
of that. Sometimes newborns just cry for no reason.
Hmm.
And I thought, well, maybe we just got one of the crying babies. My daughter wasn't like that, but I thought, well, this may be what it is. Um, and my midwife told me to do a lot of skin to skin with him. And so I did. I would lay around in the recliner with him and then we got around to that first night because like I said, I'd given birth at like 6 a.m. that morning. We'd gone all day, and then
Hmm.
that by the time I got to that night, he was still just not okay. And so I told my mom, I said, I was scared to kind of put him in the bed with me. Um,
Hmm.
and so I said, I'm gonna sit on the couch and kind of like recline and just lay him on my chest through the night. Um, just give him skin to skin all night long.
Sure. Yeah.
And so that's what we did. And he would sleep for a little while, and then all of a sudden his eyes would just pop open, like if you were surprised by something, and then he would just scream and
Mm.
start crying. And then I would comfort him, and we just kind of did that on and off all night. Well, by the time the morning rolled around, he was crying pretty much constantly.
Mm.
Um, and I mean, we just nothing could settle him. He wouldn't nurse. Since it was my first day and I hadn't nursed before either, that breastfeeding was a whole new adventure.
Yeah.
And so I hadn't figured out how to work my pump. Um, and I tried to pump because I thought maybe I could get a little bit of colostrum to give him,
Mm-hmm.
and that wasn't really working out well. Um, and so finally, it came time for like our first appointment. And so we got him loaded up, and the whole time he's just crying, nonstop crying. Put him in the car seat, put him in the car, um, get to the birthing center, and he's just crying. And then you were there, so you kind of know what happened once we got there.
I'd love to hear in
And
your words, though, for sure.
yeah, yeah. So, what I didn't realize was from the time we left the house to the time we got to the birthing center, um, he, I mean, what I didn't know at that time was that he was just not breathing well on his own. And so by the time we got to the birthing center, his color had changed. And I remember when we got there and I went to take him out of the car seat, James looked at him and said, he looks kind of gray, like his color doesn't look right. And I said, well, maybe it's just the lighting, Um, I was
Mm-hmm.
frazzled and sleep deprived, and I didn't even think too much about it. And um, so he left me and Abby there, and he's like, well, I'm gonna run down to Walmart while you're at your appointment, and then I'll come back and pick you guys up. So we got into the room, and you and my midwife were there, and she said, well, let's try to help you with this breastfeeding. Obviously he's starving, more or less. And so we were kind of getting set up, and she was trying to position him on my breast, and I remember she just stopped, and I think she said something like he's blue, um, something, made some kind of comment about how he
It was
looked.
something about his color. I don't remember
Yeah,
exactly what
something
it
about his
was.
color. And she just got him real quick and unbuttoned his onesie and looked at him, and she's like, he's in respiratory distress. And then everything just started happening really fast.
Mm-hmm.
She was like, she hollered at you and she's like, get the oxygen out and call 911 and call ambulance. And we went in there and she got him on the oxygen, and then you guys were on the phone, and I'm just kind of standing there like, what is happening right now? What is going on?
I can't imagine what you felt right then and what was going through your head.
Yeah, it was so surreal, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I was just like, uh, I just couldn't understand what was happening. Um, and so they called the ambulance, and it was almost like time kind of stood still for me. I don't
Mm-hmm.
even know how long we were there. I mean, it was probably minutes, before the EMTs got there.
I
And
think we
then,
recorded it. It was something like 7 minutes, somewhere around there.
oh wow. So like all of a sudden there was all these people in the room. There's EMTs and I think some firemen maybe,
Mm-hmm. The
and
paramedics come with.
paramedics.
Mhm.
And so anyway, they got us onto a gurney. They put me on a gurney and put Ben in my lap. And then they gave me like the tiniest oxygen mask you've ever seen. And he was so small that even that tiny, tiny oxygen mask, I still had to like hold it on his face to keep it on there. And they wheeled us outside and put us
Yeah, I
up in
think
there.
that
And
was the one that we had because I don't think they had one small. I had never seen something like that happen. Usually, if there's going to be any type of issues, that happens at birth. It's not later like that. And really, I can't imagine what would have happened if you lived further away from town.
well, and unfortunately, she was right down the street from the hospital as well.
Yes,
So I mean,
yes,
it was
location. I
minutes to the
mean,
hospital.
everything was just perfect for that.
Well, and her having the oxygen on hand as well,
Mm-hmm.
it was like,
It's
looking
wonderful.
back, you can realize like how close everything came to, him
For
possibly not
sure.
making it. I mean, if we
Well,
had,
what if James had wanted to stop at the store beforehand instead of dropping you guys off and then going to the store and then coming back?
yeah, I mean, just,
There's so many
and
variables that you could
there's so
play,
many variables. And,
but
as we go through, I just see how God's hand was in
exactly.
everything, just how everything fell into place kind of perfectly. Like,
Absolutely.
as you said, there
Everybody
was
was
really no
where
room.
they were supposed to be at that time
Yeah.
frame to help him
Yeah,
for
there was
sure.
no room for any variables.
Yes, for sure. I mean, from the timing from you getting to the birth center to the timing of your midwife seeing what was going on to the timing of her calling 911 and her getting that oxygen on him as soon, I mean, she was really fast on getting that oxygen on him.
Yeah,
I was so
she
like,
was on it.
wow. Yes, she was amazing. So, I mean, it was just, yeah, it was all of the little pieces. And now, and we're just talking about this just first part of
Right.
the whole ordeal. Even this is the first realizing that there's a problem and that we need to help Ben, and then getting him. So you guys got in the ambulance then, and they had a you had a little mask on him with oxygen, and what did they have you do with him?
So, I mean, I basically just sat there on the gurney and held the oxygen on him until we got to the emergency room. And my midwife had already called ahead. She called the NICU and let them
Mm-hmm.
know what was going on. So the time we got to the emergency room, the head nurse from the NICU actually met us there.
Mm-hmm.
And so she kind of oversaw kind of like getting him stable. And when they wheeled us into a room, and I couldn't see what was going on. There was just tons, just a whole team of people in there around him. And I'm still, I think, just kind of in shock. Not even, it's just not even real what's happening.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And they probably talked to me. I don't I don't remember what they said. Um, but anyway, I don't know how long I was there, but they got him stable. They put him on a CPAP, which is basically just like a big face mask that kind of
Right.
covers their whole nose and mouth. Um, and they got him stable down there. And then the head nurse told me, she said, "Okay, we're gonna take you guys up to the NICU." And they put me in a wheelchair. Because I mean, I had just given birth, like, probably 36 hours ago by this point.
Right, right.
Technically, I should have still been on bed rest.
Yeah.
So while they're wheeling us up there, she's kind of having me tell her, what has happened up to this point. So they get us up to NICU, and then it's kind of the same thing again. Like they wheel him into a room, and they just immediately kind of get to work doing stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
me and James talk about sometimes how that first day is there's just like big chunks of our memories missing, like where we honestly don't even hardly know what happened. I know I was there.
Yeah.
I know I was there sitting terrified on a little couch.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, this whole team of nurses around him. And at some point, in the day, a doctor came in and he said that for sure that Ben had pulmonary hypertension,
Mm-hmm.
um, which I can't remember exactly what it meant, but it was something to the effect of, um, his heart was just not helping the air get to his lungs.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so he said, I'm going to treat him, um, for that, with a gas. And I would say what it is, but I don't want to say the wrong thing. But so I'll
That's
just say
fine.
they were going to treat him with a gas. And he said, well, we're gonna run some tests because pulmonary hypertension is usually caused by an infection. And so he said, we need to figure out what the infection was.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, um, I think his first thought was that it was meningitis.
Mm-hmm.
And so he they sent us out of the room because to test for meningitis, they have to do a lumbar puncture,
Oh.
um, which for those who don't know is where it's almost like an epidural where they stick
Mm-hmm.
a needle in at the base of the spine and they take out some spinal fluid and they look at the color and then they also run some tests on it. They will like grow some cultures and things like that. Um, and they initially said, that'll take a couple days to get back. And we said, okay. So they sent us out, and I'm so glad they didn't let us stay in there because I can't imagine.
Oh.
Because um, they basically kind of opened up where his umbilical cord was,
Mm.
and they ran his feeding tube in there. Um, and then they did the lumbar puncture, and they were in there a really long time. Yeah, I don't even know how long. I think we waited
Oh
outside for maybe
goodness.
2 hours. And come to find out the reason why is because he was fighting them really hard, they said.
Oh.
Which, I'm glad he's a fighter, but it was making it so much
Right.
harder on him
For
for them
sure.
to do that lumbar puncture. And so, by this point, by the time they got all this done, it was like 9:30 or something.
Mm-hmm.
And the nurse came out and she said it's going to take a couple days to get the culture back. She said, I'm just going to tell you when we got his fluid out, it was green.
Oof.
And I've never seen spinal fluid green like that.
Oh
So
goodness.
she said, I just really think it's meningitis, which I didn't know what meningitis was. I had
Mm-hmm.
heard of it, but I'm kind of glad at the time that I didn't understand how serious it was because I
Mm-hmm.
think I would have just,
Might
I
have
don't
broke
know, I might
down.
have just had some sort of mental breakdown
For
because
sure.
now I know that with bacterial meningitis, with an infant, they can die within like 48 hours.
Yeah.
It's really serious.
Very.
Um, so when we went back into his room, um, I couldn't even get to him. They had blue lights over him. They had him kind of they had him wrapped up. They had blinders on his eyes. They had cotton over his ears.
Mm.
He was just hooked up to so many things. He had this CPAP on. Um, and they told me that to not touch him because he was hurting really bad.
Mm.
And so kind of at
That
that
had to be
point,
so hard, Mom. How do
oh,
you deal with that?
yeah, I mean, kind of when I walked in and saw him like that, I looked at Jane and I said, I can't be here anymore. That
Mm.
I can't see him like this. I can't sit here and look at him and not be able to touch him. He can't see us, he can't hear us. And so James, he said, okay, I'm gonna take you home. And so we he looked at the head nurse and he said, I'm gonna take her home, just call us if there's any changes at all.
Mm-hmm.
And so we got home, and that's kind of when everything hit me, was
Oh,
to
yeah.
come into home to an empty nursery,
Mm.
and just to see, his little things around the house. I mean, because technically he had just been there that morning,
Right.
and that's when it just hit me really hard. And at some point after we got home, the head nurse called us and she said she confirmed that it was meningitis.
Mm-hmm.
She said usually the culture takes a couple days, but she said the infection is so bad that that's just how rapidly the
They
culture
could
grew.
tell. Yeah,
It just
wow.
grew at light speed. And again, still I didn't really know what meningitis was. I think James immediately got on Google
Yeah.
and
I
started
bet.
Googling it. Um,
Which is not a great idea.
no, no, it's really not.
Yeah.
Um, so obviously that night, we didn't we didn't sleep or anything. I'm kind of dozed on and off, I think, and then um, soon as I don't know 5 or 6 o'clock, I called
Mm-hmm.
and asked him how he was, how he was through the night and everything. Um, and he was fine. They said that he was he was still stable and kind of everything is as it was when we left the night before.
Hello, Healing Trauma Mamas listeners. I wanted to pause the podcast just for a moment to let you know about the platform that I've been using to create this podcast, Anchor by Spotify. Anchor has been so easy for me to use. As you all know, I've said many times that I'm a very unlikely podcast host. In fact, I never thought I'd be on a podcast, let alone hosting one myself. But when my daughter showed me Anchor last spring, I realized how easy it was for me to be able to create content and upload it to many different platforms using Anchor. I'm so thankful I got started, and I'm extremely thankful it's completely free. So I think that every single person has something valuable to share with the world. You listening right now have something valuable to share. And all you have to do is download the Anchor app and start your own podcast today. Let me know when you do, and I look forward to listening to it. Okay, back to the podcast.
So we kind of threw ourselves together and got out there to the hospital. And sort of the first amazing thing that happened was when we got there, they had already taken down his oxygen 40%.
Wow.
When we left the night before, it was at 100%. He was almost on life support. I mean, he
Man.
just, uh, he just wasn't breathing on his own at all. So when we walked in, we were really surprised. And the doctor came in and he said that the gas they were treating him with, that started responding to it almost immediately,
Mm.
and it was already helping the hypertension. And so just a note about his doctor. This is one of the things that I think is a God thing. The doctor that he had, his name was Dr. Moyne. He was not even a resident doctor at our hospital. He was actually visiting from Cook's Hospital in Dallas. He was there. I think he said would come in like once a month or once a quarter or something.
Mm-hmm.
And he would be on call, but he would also be there to kind of teach others. And so wherever he would go, there would sort of be like this whole team of nurses following him around, taking notes and
That's
stuff.
great.
Yeah. And he was just fabulous. I mean, he was just a wonderful doctor. Um, but he told us that morning, he said, I haven't seen a case like this in 20 years. I've been doing this.
Oh,
He
man.
said he is very, very sick. But he said, I'm optimistic he will recover. Um, they were treating him initially, I think, with 3 different types of antibiotics for the meningitis.
Mm.
Um, they got in contact with a infectious disease specialist out of
Mm-hmm.
Dallas um, that he would kind of consult with. Um, so Dr. Moyne had the infectious disease expert, um, and that I never did learn that doctor's name, but his recommendation was 3 weeks of antibiotics, through an IV.
Mm-hmm.
So he said, you guys are going to be here a minimum of 21 days, basically.
Wow.
Um, and they kind of acted like to us, it was going to be a really hard road of recovery. Um, but well, before I get too ahead of myself, so Ben had a feeding tube because he was how do they call it when you have the tube in your throat? I forget what they call it. It's not an aspirator. Anyway, so he had the tube because he couldn't breathe on his own.
Oh, a ventilator.
And ventilator,
And a
that's it.
ventilator. I don't know why my brain couldn't figure that out.
It was
Yeah, so
a
he was
lot of
on a
stuff.
ventilator completely.
On a ventilator. And so he had a feeding tube, so obviously he couldn't nurse. And they said the meningitis makes your whole body hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And so I couldn't even touch him still. They would have what they called touch time,
Mm-hmm.
where every so often they would change his diaper, and they would do everything kind of at once to limit how much he had to be touched.
Yeah.
And so that was the only time I really got to interact with him.
Mm.
So during touch time, they would let me change his diaper.
Oh.
And then they would let me do little things like take his temperature. Um,
Are
and
you able to touch him at this point? So when you change
I,
your
I,
diapers, it's okay to touch him?
I could. He was still wrapped up. They had him in this little, I don't know, like a donut looking thing to kind of keep him in place.
Okay.
And and because he was hurting, I mean, they more or less kind of kept him sedated. I would
Yeah.
say for at least the first 48 hours.
Oh.
They were giving him morphine, along with a couple other things, just because he was in a lot of pain. And then if he would kind of come to, he would just sort of freak out. And that was one of the hardest things for me is when he would kind of wake up,
Mhm.
he would grab at that ventilator and try to
Oh,
pull it out of his little mouth,
poor guy.
And I remember at one point I was standing there at lunchtime and seeing him do that, and
Hmm.
tears were just coming down my face, and a nurse across from me like wiped my tears away.
Oh.
Um, which is just so sweet. Um, that was probably the hardest thing was just, you know, your baby is miserable and hurting, and there's not a thing you can do about it.
That's awful. I
Um,
mean, absolutely awful. Because that's all
yeah,
a mama wants to do is try to comfort her baby and be the one to take care of her
yeah,
baby. So I can't imagine having to, which you had an amazing team that
I
was helping
did.
with him. So that's wonderful, but that's so much trust in them to be able to, like what you're doing and you're taking care of him, but this is my job.
Mhm.
I can't
Yeah,
imagine how your
I will
mama heart
say
felt.
the NICU staff, they really are wonderful because I think
Mhm.
to work in that department, you have to really love babies.
You have to.
And so the nurses were wonderful, and I'll talk about one in particular in a bit, but for the most part, they were all really good. Um, and caring with him. But the so I mentioned earlier this was going to be kind of my first journey with breastfeeding,
Hmm.
which I was not getting to do. Um, but the doctor told me, he said, the best thing you can do for him right now is give him your milk. Especially, I was still making colostrum at that
Okay.
point.
Hmm.
And so they wheeled me in a pump, and I got a little kit with all the parts in it. And at the hospital, they have these pumps. They cost like $2,000. They are fabulous. They probably the closest thing you could get to actually a baby nursing.
Really?
Um, and it was kind of amazing because those pumps had a cycle. So like you would basically just turn it on and you could control the suction. But other
Hmm.
than that, it would just sort of run a cycle and then you were done.
Hmm.
And so in a strange turn of events, that pump kind of taught me what it should feel like to have a letdown, to have the
Sure.
um that have the milk come out. And then when I would come home, because I would pump all day, and then I was coming home at night to get a little bit of sleep, and then I pump at home. And so when I got home with my more primitive pump, I knew what it was supposed to feel like.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that I kind of learned how to do it in a really strange way.
But that's great that you were able to learn because you didn't get to have him to, actually have him at the breast at that time at all.
Right.
So I'm sure that was difficult to be able to even get your body to respond well.
Yeah, it was tough. But it was a blessing in a way because pumping gave me a purpose in a
Mm-hmm.
situation where I felt really helpless.
Mm.
It was something that I really think it kept me sane because
Uh,
I thought I cannot do anything for him right now except pray and do this.
mm.
And so I just set my mind to that, just pumping,
Good.
every 2 to 3 hours. And that was just my mission, While I was there, I thought this is a way I can help him is to do this.
I love
And
that.
so I would pump and they would pull whatever I could get, which is not much those first couple of days.
Yeah,
They,
yeah.
they would take whatever I could get and they would pull it up in a syringe and then they would give it to him in his feeding tube.
Mm.
So, but it was really amazing because he just defied everyone's expectations in something that they really expected to probably take the entire time we were there.
Hmm.
He improved so rapidly. We're just every day he was making these huge strides. To where I think it was by day 4, um, they were already pulling him off of oxygen.
Wow.
The doctor was, I mean, he was not expecting that at all. And they came in one day and he had the ventilator in, and all of a sudden they realized he was breathing over the ventilator.
Oh,
He didn't need it.
yay.
And so they pulled that out. They switched him to the little nose oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
And even that, he just kept that for maybe a day, kind of as a precautionary.
Mm-hmm.
But then even that by day 5, he was off oxygen completely.
Wow.
It was amazing. And so,
Yeah.
by that point, the doctor said, okay, let's get him on a breast. Um, and he was really excited to get him on the breast because what I came to find out was that, breastfeeding, or what he told me was that breastfeeding is a really complicated, motor function to be
Mm-hmm.
able to suck and breathe, all at the same time.
Yes.
And, with meningitis, one of the complications can be, loss of your motor functions.
Mm-hmm.
And so, they put him on, and I thought he's not going to be able to do it. He hasn't nursed in a week. There's no way. And he latched on just immediately,
Oh, I love
and
it.
just beautifully. I was so happy, and the doctor was just ecstatic. He was like, "Okay, I think he's going to be okay." Because
Oh,
if he can do this, I don't see him having any sort of brain damage.
wow.
So it's just amazing. And the just like the prayer network that
Mm-hmm.
we had, it was just, almost the every church in town, I think, might have been praying for him.
And out of
And
town. I know
and
lots of
out of
churches that were
town.
praying out of town.
Yes. And
Yeah.
on the radio, on a Christian radio station, they were praying for him.
Oh, I love it.
I mean, and I believe that God just healed him, and he healed him in a big
Mm-hmm.
way. Um, and it was spectacular. I loved to give people reports and just say, just see what God is doing. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
It is absolutely just again, like we said, all the right people just in the perfect spot where they needed to be to help in the journey of everything that happened with Ben. Just amazing. I mean, absolutely amazing.
Hmm. Yeah.
How how is that affected? So how many days did he stay total in the hospital?
So he was 21 days in the hospital.
He only had to do his exact 21, huh?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it was wonderful.
hmm
Well, how did you transition to life at home with him?
Um, so the biggest thing when we came home, I think he might have had some anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
Um, pretty much that whole first week, he was cluster feeding almost nonstop.
I'm
Um,
sure.
which, was fine with me because because of everything we had been through, I was more than happy for the closeness.
Mm-hmm.
But he he almost hardly never left the breast, even at night. I think I was sleeping in my rocking chair a lot.
Oh,
Um, but over time, he just gradually became more and more comfortable, and um, he just loves his sister, and um, having her hold him and
yes.
everything. She's like his second mom almost.
Yeah. How did
Um,
she deal? Because I know we kind of mentioned that she was with you when you had come to your appointment at the birth center. Do you mind me asking how did she handle all that? Because that was a lot for a little girl to see happen in front of her.
yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think it was pretty traumatic for her. Um, and she's kind of one of those kids who doesn't open up a whole lot about
Mm,
stuff.
yeah.
So it may even be one of those things where she doesn't tell me until she's older, mom,
Right, for
this
sure.
is what I was feeling. But when we were in the hospital, she definitely voiced a lot of frustration because in NICU, they
Oh,
don't allow anyone under 18, COVID or no COVID.
that's hard.
That's just one of their health restrictions because they said young kids get sick so
For
much.
sure. Yeah.
Um, they just can't have that risk.
Yeah.
It's pretty sterile up there in NICU,
Yeah. It
which
makes
you.
sense for sure,
Mhm.
but I'm sure that was so difficult on her.
It was tough, and I was gone almost all the time. I was coming home very little because
Hmm.
I was, especially once he started nursing at the hospital, I was up there nursing him as much as possible.
That's great.
Um, One of the nice things they had up at the NICU was they actually had a family counselor.
Hmm.
And so that lady would come in, and she would um, talk to me a lot about Abby, and maybe kind of how to handle some conversations with her. They would send things home for her. So they put together like a big sister bag for her with lots of
Oh,
goodies in it. They made a picture book for her where it was kind of like a picture tour of the NICU,
nice.
and she loved that. And so, little things like that kind of helped. And then I would try to make a schedule where I was at least coming home for a family dinner. And then,
That's good.
maybe I would go back to the hospital for a while and come back.
Hmm.
But yeah, it was really hard on her, and especially she was so excited to have a sibling.
Yeah.
And then just sort of just have that ripped away all of a sudden was
Yeah.
really tough
I
for
remember
her.
how emotional she was when he was born. It was so
Yeah.
sweet. Such a sweet relationship with a big sister. Just, so excited to see her baby brother and be that part of it. And I can't imagine how difficult that was for her to then be separated from him for so long. So
Yeah.
she's a trooper though.
Oh, she is. She really, hung in there.
Hmm.
But once we brought him home, she like banned all visitors for a week. She's like,
I
I
don't
just
blame
want him to
her.
myself.
I don't blame her one bit for sure. Yeah, I got to make up some time.
hmm
So after you guys came home, you said he cluster fed a lot. How was life different? Which you didn't get much time at home with him before he ended up in the NICU.
Right.
Was there anything that you had to do with him special or anything like that?
No,
Good.
we really didn't. It was like, um, when he was healed, he was healed, and
Yay.
he was just, I mean, he was just like any other baby, and um, with bacterial meningitis,
Mm-hmm.
the things that can go wrong is, like I said, they can lose their motor skills. One of the big things is they can go deaf.
Mm-hmm.
They can get fluid on the brain. Um, so before we left the hospital, they checked all those things and everything was completely normal.
Mm,
They even took him for a brain scan. Everything came back normal.
what a
And I mean,
miracle.
yes, I mean, God just worked a
Oh.
miracle in him. I mean, for him to, I mean, especially for him to be that sick, um,
Mm-hmm.
you know, we're now looking back, I think that even the staff thought he may not make it, but they never told us that, you know,
Mm-hmm.
to come from being that bad to he's completely fine, is just a
Wow.
God thing.
Absolutely.
And
It absolutely is. And him putting everybody in place that need to be where they were, and just wow, it's just miraculous, that quick healing too. I, I don't even know. Like
and
I just remember praising with everybody, like, oh my word. Everybody would ask me for an update. How's the baby? How's the baby? You know?
yeah, it's amazing. And I want to say, because I get questioned about this, is that he didn't get sick because I had a natural birth. And
Mhm.
I think that's important for people listening to know. What I mean, but for those listening,
Right. Yeah, for
what
sure.
happened is, um I had a you have to tell me what the bacteria is called. Um
Group B strep.
Group B strep. I had group B strep, and he caught that as he came out of the birth canal. But we had tested for that
We had.
before he was born. A matter of fact, we tested two different ways. We did a urine test. Um, well, she did it. We did a swab, and then she
Mm-hmm.
also sent off for a culture.
Yep,
So we tested two different ways, and they were both negative.
they were.
And so the doctor said, at the hospital, the only thing they can think of is that I became positive somewhere between, because it was only 2 weeks before my birth,
Yeah, I was gonna say it
but
was pretty
somewhere
quick between the
it was
two.
really close. And he said just somewhere in that 2 weeks, I became positive for the group B strep. And so,
And it's so
you know,
unusual because the standard protocol is what we did and beyond. So
right.
it's just one of those things that there was nothing that we could do about that.
Yeah, there was just, it was just no way to know.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and you might could go the rest of your midwife journey and never see another case like it.
So
I
true.
actually think I looked it up, and babies that actually get that, it's something like 1 in 10,000. It's
Hmm.
so rare.
Hmm.
Um, but anyway, I have a hard time being looking back and being any sort of bitter about the experience, because I feel like I'm able to glorify God through it, and just have this testimony to share with people, about how mighty He is, and um and just the amazing things that He can do, and all the ways that He works, and just the way that He used the hospital staff, and all the people that He sent into our lives. It's just
Hmm.
really incredible.
It absolutely is. Just the whole process, everything that happened. I mean, you could have come away from it traumatized completely,
Hmm.
because it was very traumatic. There was a lot
Yes.
that came with it. So I love that you've turned that around and just glorifying the Lord and praising Him, in the whole process. That's amazing. Seriously, that's just so wonderful. So how is he now?
He is just thriving. He's just doing
Mm.
amazing. He's just getting so fat he can't hardly keep him in clothes.
Oh, I love
Um,
it. How old is he
he,
now?
So let's see, today's the 10th. So he's about 5.5 months. He weighs about 18 pounds, and
Yay.
he's sitting up and jabbering, and
Oh,
he's
that's
just so
wonderful.
so interested in the world. He's really getting at that stage where he wants to grab at everything, and he's watching everything, and just you can see his little mind is just soaking
Hmm.
everything in. So it's amazing.
It's
And
wonderful. Boy, I wonder
and
what
you
God has in store for him.
I know, we talk about that. We're like, man, God must have some really big plans for him
For
because
sure.
he's not gonna turn him loose. It,
Yeah, to have such an amazing story to start with at the beginning that I'm sure you're going to tell him, as he gets older, like, you are an
oh
amazing
yeah.
fighter, look what you've already gone through. And yeah, that's just wonderful. I'm so thankful that you came on the podcast to share with everyone because that's just an incredible story and journey that you have been on and little Ben has been on. So I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. If there's any other mamas out there that have experienced anything like that, or if something like that happens with them, is there any tips, advice, or any word that you would like to share with them?
So you mean somebody who might be experiencing that currently, or someone who's
Yeah,
already been
yeah, or
through it?
has experienced it in the way they might can look at it a little differently.
Sure. Well, there are some upsides to it, and once you do get your baby home, you just appreciate them so much
Mm,
more,
mm-hmm.
and you just treasure all those moments. When you spend time, and I mean, there's lots of moms whose babies have to go to NICU for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they're born prematurely, or for whatever reason. Um, and some babies have to be in an incubator, which he didn't. At any point,
Yay.
he didn't have to be in
Mm,
an incubator. Um, but when you spend that time not being able to hold your baby, once you're able to, you just treasure that
for
so much. You're
sure.
like,
Oh.
I could just sit and hold them all day long if I
Mm.
didn't have other, things I have to do. Um, but you just think that's just the greatest gift, is to be able to hold them.
Because you
And
don't want to take that time for granted because you know how,
yes, you just soak
yeah.
up those minutes, and I would say that's maybe the best way to look at it, is if you do have to go through that hospital experience, that it's just going to teach you how much that baby means to you, you
Hmm.
know,
Their
and
value.
yeah, just their value, and their little lives, and how precious they are.
Yes.
You'll really come to appreciate it.
Mm,
And our wonderful medical um, advancements as well.
that's true.
Appreciate
Yeah.
those.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Even from, I mean, this is from the beginning, from just having oxygen and being able to get oxygen on
Right.
him so quickly. And then all the other advancements, as he went and had to get more and more stuff done. I mean, it's a wonder, all these amazing minds that God gave people to be able to figure out all these different things that to help us. And that's just so neat how he used all of that to really show us all an amazing miracle in Ben and work in your life, and you guys will absolutely never forget it.
No. And it's kind of amazing. At the hospital, they did this thing for him called the Beads of Courage,
Mm-hmm.
which is basically every day that he was there, any sort of trial he had to go through, whether it was, a lumbar puncture, because he actually ended up having to have multiple of those, lumbar
Oh.
puncture, a treatment, he had physical therapy because he had to just lay in that bed so much.
Mm-hmm.
So everything like that, they would give him a bead. And so by the time you leave, he was there 3 weeks, so he has this enormous strand of beads,
Oh.
and you get a little card that tells what each bead represents. So when he gets bigger, you can actually use the beads to tell him his story.
Thank you for listening. May you be encouraged and strengthened by what you've heard today. Remember, you are dearly loved by your Creator, So be who He created you to be. May you go in peace, friends. Till next time, Shalom.